I'm Josh Cooperman, and this is Convo by Design with a very special episode. Part of a new series, actually, of the show, and something that I have been working on for quite some time. But I wanted to get through year 10 prior to rolling this out, and maybe you'll understand why. Do you know that in the 11 plus years of Convo by Design, I have published over 450 episodes, spoken with over 600 creatives, produced over 6 panel conversations for design events across the country. From all of those amazing conversations with the world's greatest creative talent, I wanted to start enshrining some of these individuals into something new. The Convo by Design Icon Registry. A Hall of Fame, if you will. So listen, I don't do contests, and I most certainly don't do lists. Lists are gimmicks designed to capture clicks. They're clickbait, pure and simple. And by the way, this goes back to my decades in radio, in broadcast, in radio, TV. Lists are what you do to boost ratings. They're what you do to boost engagement and conversations. And I don't believe in that. And listen, you can't tell me that a list of 50, 75, or 100 designers and architects are the absolute best in the world at what they do without providing context, right? Lists are created in the hopes that those who are being listed will promote the accolades, and that attention will be given back to the author of the list. I'm not bashing anybody that does lists. It's a tool. It's a promotion. It's a marketing tool, and it works. But that's not what I want to do. And contests where creatives have to reach out to their base to get them to vote for them, to me, is just wrong, in my opinion. Because if someone is amazing at what they do, celebrate that. No strings attached. Don't make them jump through hoops. Just celebrate them. And that's what we're going to do here. Now, the criteria. Each inductee has been a guest of Convo by Design. They have a body of work that is absolutely exceptional in their various disciplines at what they do. And there is no justification required for their world-class status. You look at them, you listen to them, you know who they are, and they get the respect because of what they've done, and they give back to the industry. They're innovators, givers, and make our industry better than they found it. That's special. This project is called the Convo by Design Icon Registry, because that's what this is. Tantamount to a Hall of Fame, yes, but more. What is an icon? An icon is described as a person or thing regarded as a representative symbol or as worthy of veneration. A registry is a well-curated list. You can consider this a venerable who's who in our industry, with gifts to offer and a willingness to share. So Pablo Picasso is credited with saying, quote, end quote, "The meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose is to give it away." Now, I am not suggesting that those enshrined in the Icon Registry have all just been giving away their gifts. These are professionals of the highest order, and part of being a professional is knowing your worth and understanding your value. Each of these individuals have appeared on Convo by Design, shared what they know for the betterment of others, and I am deeply appreciative for that. This is the most authentic way that I can express my gratitude for that. As deeply appreciative as I am for their sharing, I am equally grateful for your taking the time to share a few moments, an hour, out of your busy schedule each week to listen to the show. Again, the most authentic way that I can express that gratitude is to give you an opportunity to hear from them again. Every month, the last Thursday of the month, unless it's a holiday week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, you get it. in which case I will publish a week sooner. But every month there will be a new inductee. And this is the first inductee to the Convo by Design Icon Registry, Bunny Williams.
A lot of us can work more at home. We don't have to be in the office, 5 days a week. And it can be successful. We've learned Zoom calls. Clients don't require me to come there once a week or once a month. And we work with architects. I work on the plans over Zoom calls. I used to have to go to the office. I used to have to go on site visits. I was on a plane once a week. I think that will change, and I'm glad. It was hard work.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because, in 2019, you were already talking about specifying online and doing research online. And now, prior to last year, you had many companies who had shifted away from the physical catalogs entirely, and many designers and architects who had stopped using physical catalogs in a library in order to get everything digitally. And I'm curious, without being able to predict a lockdown, do you think you had what you needed, or do you think that we now understand that we need a little bit more?
I think there are two things. I have my furniture company, Bunny Williams Home. When I started Bunny Williams Home 10 years ago, I very much wanted it online from the beginning. And I wanted that because I wanted it to be accessible to people across the country who wouldn't come to a showroom. And I knew that from my own career, that it's fine if you can go into a showroom, but not everybody lives in a city where there's a showroom. So Bunny Williams Home went online from the very beginning. And because of that, we survived very well during COVID. We had inventory, number one, and number two, it was already geared up to be online. I think that companies that were ahead of the game that way really, it paid off. From the interior design standpoint, for me, one of the things that I had to do is build more of my library here in Connecticut where I would be working, because I wasn't going to the office. So I was a little bit behind in that. And I knew things I wanted. They sent me, the sample books. I even got Benjamin Moore to send me the big paint thing so I could see it other than a 1x1 little dot. And so if you're changing where you work, you've got to build up your own library. Many designers who are not, they have it in their homes. I mean, it's not uncommon for them to have swatch books and things like that. I just didn't have it here, so I had to put it together.
And I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you about how this has affected the office, but I want to come from a different perspective. You do something that is truly amazing. Your mentorship program, I mean, you're kind of a star maker in design. You really are. What's interesting about that is this is an experience this is something that you experienced as well, working for Parrish Hadley.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to work at Parrish Hadley. I was 22 years old. I was hired as a secretary. I started at the bottom. I'd had 1 year of a junior college with a design program. I hadn't been to design school. I wanted to go work with that firm, and I was willing to take any job I could get. What was interesting about going to work with a firm like that is that you immediately knew, you were really exposed right away to what you didn't know. I mean, you might have a good color sense and have some background. I'd worked in an antique shop, but when you saw the scale of these projects, how they were put together, how they were organized, what you had to do as a designer, you had to tell the sofa you're ordering, you have to tell every detail. Do you want a welt? Do you want a gimp? Do you want a skirt? How do you want the skirt to fall? Every single thing we do as a designer has detail, has customization. And I was like, wow, and you have to get it right, and you have to communicate it. So it was an amazing experience. Albert, who had been a teacher at FIT, was always a teacher to us. I mean, we used to have to do a scheme for him to, we had to make a presentation to him. And then he would very kindly tell us that it was hideous, or that he used to say, I would bring in, I'd say, oh, I have this fabulous mirror for this dining room. And he'd say, have you scaled it in? Of course I hadn't. And he knew right away it didn't fit. He could just look at it and tell it didn't fit. And then I would embarrassingly go draw it in on the elevation. And of course it didn't fit. And that's when you learn that you've got to scale everything in. I mean, you can't be buying for a project that's 300 miles away unless you know it's going to fit that space. And so there are these principles of things that I certainly learned, and I hope to pass on to my office and people who work for me. I don't expect anybody to work for me forever, but I hope that what they learn from me, that they will go out and be better designers.
Let's look at it from the other perspective as well, because something that you said really struck me. And as a matter of fact, I was having a conversation recently with my son, who's a senior in high school going to college, and I was sharing with him something that I heard you say, and it has nothing to do with design because he's not a designer. But you said that one of the things that you learned working at Parrish Hadley was from Sister Parrish, because she was such an enthusiast and fan for chaos and mayhem, that you learned what you didn't want. You learned what you didn't like, and how that helped you. I think I'm paraphrasing, but how it sort of helped bypass certain landmines that you would encounter in your career.
Well, I also think that we learn from everything. We study, we learn. A good designer is going to absorb a lot of things and put it together. I saw two very different people, their work habits, how they did it. Somebody asked me one time, why did you stay there long? Why didn't you leave before? Because I had so many clients of my own. And I said, I was always worried about the business. I knew I could be creative, but what always worried me was paying the bills, the estimating, the business part of it. And somebody said to me, well, don't you know there are people who like to do that? And I'm like, really? And so the minute I understood that, I was able to hire a young girl about my age who had run a business, and she came in and set up the business side of it. So I think that one of the things at Parrish Hadley is they had this great business office. Everything there were accountants and the bills were paid, and I thought, well, if I leave here, I'm going to have to do all that myself, and that I'm not sure I would be so good at. So you learn, working in a firm, you learn what it takes. You learn not only the creative part, but the business part. And if you don't have the business part down pat, you're never going to succeed in it. It's absolutely essential. You have to send estimates, you have to stick to it, you have to make sure you get your deposits. And it is a business. Yes, it's creative and it's very personal, but in the end, it's a business.
And what's simply amazing to me about all of this as well is not just the talent that has come through your door and learned under your tutelage, but that you really live this through, and the future of the legacy of the firm and you and your firm. Tell me about Elizabeth.
Well, I was so lucky. Elizabeth Lawrence, who is my partner now, came to me as an intern. She was a student at New York School of Interior Design, where last year she got the Albert Hadley Award, which she greatly deserved. And her mother had said to her, go intern, go. And, they discussed interning with me, just like I wanted to work at Parrish Hadley. So Elizabeth came in as an intern. She was very bright, very energetic. I liked her immediately. I often, when the first interns come in, I don't always work with them. They go to work with one of my design teams, but I got to know them, and I saw that Elizabeth was particularly talented and had a good eye. She went back and finished school, and then she came back and I offered her a job, and she's been with me ever since. And it's so good. The internship to me is so important because you really get to know somebody's personality. You know whether they're going to fit in. You know how they're going to be able to deal with clients. And as we all know in this business, your relationship with clients is very complicated, and you have to have enough confidence to listen to the client and to sell them on the ideas that you have. It's a complicated relationship. It's much easier to be a lawyer or a dentist because they don't second guess you. But a decorator, we get second guessed all the time. So how you handle the clients and how you handle the clients when they're upset, they do get upset. And do you have somebody who's strong enough in their own personality that they can listen and not break into tears and, have a meltdown, because you work it out. And so Elizabeth had that personality, and I've been so lucky that she's a part of my life now.
And a big part of the firm. She's a partner, and
a partner. She now, basically we have new jobs coming in. She handles most of them with my, I look over them. I mainly work on our old clients, of which we have a number who always seem to be moving or doing something. I don't know. And so we work in tandem, but, I encourage the new clients to work more with her and not expect to see me every day.
I bring it up too, because I think it's so important. Many of the designers that I've spoken with over the past 8 years, it's really interesting. For some reason, people go to design out of moments in real conflict. In speaking to a number of designers in New York and surrounding, who started around 9/11, some who started right after the financial crisis. How many people have we spoken to who said, "Oh yeah, I started it in 2008 or 2009. It was like great timing. I mean, your timing was perfect." But there's something about coming out of the fire and starting your firm. But there's also something about doing it smartly and doing it in an intelligent way. And you have said before, that people will go out and hang their own shingle, and they're making all their own mistakes for the very first time. Whereas if you go and you learn under the tutelage of somebody who's done it, you can avoid all of those issues.
It can save you, because I often can say, no, you can't do it this way, or the curtains ought to be made this way. So experience, I can help guide people through my experience. The other thing is, when you work for someone else for a period of time, you learn all the workrooms and you learn clients. I mean, what was interesting when I was at Parrish Hadley, often even if I worked on a job with Mr. Hadley, Albert, or Mrs. Parrish, if I did a good job, that person recommended me to their friend. So when I left Parrish Hadley, I left with 6 big projects. And they were projects that had come to me when I was in that firm. So a lot of times I think it's, if somebody's young and they hang their shingle out, you have to figure out, how are you going to get your clients? What is it? Do you have social connections? What is going to bring clients to you? Because without clients, you're not going to do very well. And I do think working with an established firm, I know people who've worked for me have probably clients who work with them, may have gone with them, but that's life. I mean, that's what happens. You want them to succeed. So I think if young people are starting out, working with an established firm will introduce them to the design world, to the magazine world, to the media world, and it'll help them tremendously.
Do you think that, being in the age of the influencer, and it's interesting, because I have an issue with the whole idea of influencers, right? Because influencers, by the very nature of what they do, they tell you what they like. If your design is a service industry, and you've said so yourself, this to be true. It's not really about what you like.
I find you are talking to somebody who doesn't get it. I mean, why should somebody who has learned to work the computers, the Instagram, the whatever, decide they're the influencer. What did they do? Have they ever decorated a room? Are they a fashion play? I don't know. I don't quite understand it. I was talking to somebody this morning from the New York Times, and we were talking about the perils of things like Instagram. And, so many young designers think, oh, if I go and, get Pinterest or Instagram and here's the picture, and then I'm going to do a mood board and this is what my client's going to get. Well, guess what? That room's already been done. Where's your creative spirit? Why do we have to copy something somebody else did? The best thing is to go back to old sources, to go back to libraries, to look at things that aren't somebody else's decorated room. And then you're going to see things that inspire you, and you're going to end up being creative and have your own, your own point of view. I mean, that's what you hire a designer for, is their point of view. But now it's also digital that, I look at rooms in a magazine and I think, oh, that's so-and-so's bedroom. Oh, I know that room. That was done by Billy Baldwin in 19. It's silly, because if you understand design, that's really not being creative.
Okay. So that being said, I want to, and I wrote it down because I want to get it right. There's a quote that's attributed to you, and you've probably heard it before, but I want to make sure I get it right. I like an interior that defies labeling. I don't really want someone to walk into a room and know that I did it, which is exactly what you're saying here. But it's so counterintuitive to the spirit of a rock star designer, an iconic, a legendary designer like you are.
Well, what I really hope, I mean, I take what I do really seriously. I think interior design and doing things, it's a very expensive process. It goes on, it takes a long time to do it. And I don't want it ever to be dated. I don't want anybody to walk in and say, oh, this was, 2020, and this was every cliche of the moment. So I also think it would be really nice if somebody walked in a house and didn't ask the first question of who did it. I mean, can't you walk into a house and think, oh, this is a pretty house, and maybe even think the client did it? I don't know. But I think that sometimes when things are so over the top, the first thing people say when they walk in is, who did it? And I think that you can get tired of that. It can become dated. It can be, exhausting. And so one has to learn how to be creative, inventive, but also tone it down.
Okay, I get it. At the same time, would you not agree that interior design is an art form?
Well, I treat it like that. I think, to me, it's like painting a picture. If I have an empty room, it's like a blank canvas. What am I going to do? It's like, every artist is, what's your color palette? How are you going to put the paint on the canvas? So I think very much if you're good at it, it's an art form. And there are certainly many designers who express that form in different ways. And that's what makes it interesting. But yes, I mean, every room to me is a big blank canvas, and I've got to make my composition, and I've got to put the colors and the textures of furniture and textiles. And it's so much like painting. I mean, I've painted my life. I'm not a great painter, but when you study art, you realize what goes into creating a canvas. And I think we're all designers are doing that every time we start on an empty room.
And I understand. I agree with you. And would it then not stand to reason that somebody would definitely want a Bunny Williams original?
Oh, clients come to you because they've liked what you do. I mean, they've seen it. They're either a friend of a friend, or they've seen something in a magazine. They come. You choose your designer because you've seen something that they've done that appeals to you. And if you don't have that, don't take them as a client. I mean, I really mean it, because that you already have a vocabulary. So, and they, people will say, and I always say to them, I'm not going to repeat that room, that house that you were in. I just don't do that. So we have to, make it our own. But I think they come to me because I'm certainly not a minimalist and I don't do a lot of white rooms. So if they want that, they're probably not going to hire me. And if they want some, very glitzy, 10 marbles used in the floor and the walls and the ceiling and, moving light fixtures, they're probably not going to come to me. So, but that's fine because there's somebody else to do that better than I do. And that's how you have a good relationship with your client.
I'm also curious too about that. When I started doing the podcast, I would have designers on, and I ask the question now when I go back and listen to past episodes, it's cringy for me. It's almost embarrassing. And while it's not a stupid question, it's definitely a pedestrian question. And I would ask, so what is your style in design, or do you have any favorite styles? And again, it's completely cringy. But over the years, I've learned something. It's not that there is a predetermined or favorite style as much as there's a fingerprint of the designer. There are specific through lines that become intrinsic to the work that the designers do, because it's almost like your personality. You can't change your personality, and some elements, even though it's the client's wishes in materials and finishes, it's still your personality that's within the design. And I guess I'm kind of leaning in a little heavy on that quote, that you don't want people to necessarily know that it was you that did the work. I don't know why I find that so surprising.
Well, I think that, people say, what is your look? I do a lot of different jobs. I mean, I work on different houses. I have different clients. I had a wonderful lady in New York who didn't want one antique. The furniture is very contemporary. The color palette, very, very simple, clean, spare. But what is the essence of every room I do is I really think, what's going to happen in this room? Where are people going to sit? How are they going to talk to each other? What's the floor plan? Where are they going to watch television? What happens in every space? Where are they going to eat? How do you maximize the use of every room in a house? And I think that underlying whether the style is more contemporary or more traditional, probably the floor plan, because I like to make furniture groups. I like to make sure that when everybody sits down, there's a table for their glass of water or their glass of wine or whatever. I want to think of their comfort. I want to think of lighting, everything to make it a comfortable room. So I think that probably comfort and usability is the consistent thing through all the projects, no matter what kind of house or what the color palette is, or is it a country house? Is it a formal apartment? They all have a different feeling because of where they are and what the architecture is. But I try to make every room absolutely usable for the client and their lifestyle.
Sometimes does that butt up against high style and design?
No, not at all. I mean, you can have the most elegant, grand room and still have it be comfortable. As I say, I tell the story of my first, I guess it was my second day at Parish Hadley, when I had to take a bag of memo samples to an apartment on Fifth Avenue. I was 22 years old. I was led up by the elevator man and rang the bell, and a butler opened the door. And behind the butler was a painting of the Picasso of the boy and the white pony. And I looked at it, and I'd studied art history, and I thought, I don't think that's a poster version. It's the first time I'd ever seen, this extraordinary art that I'd studied in every art history class hanging in someone's apartment. And I went in, and the butler was very sweet. It was the Paleys, the William Paley apartment. And the butler was very sweet. And he said, would you like to see the apartment? They are not here. And I went into this drawing room that was taxi cab yellow. I mean, it was this huge, grand French paneled room with the greatest French furniture, beautiful. I mean, and there were Gauguins hanging on the wall, Van Goghs. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. And it was a comfortable room. There were big chocolate brown satin sofas with yellow batik pillows on it. And here was millions of dollars worth of art and furniture, and it was a comfortable room. And I thought to myself, this is what I hope that someday I will learn how to do.
And I guess 6 or 7 years prior to that moment was basically one of your first impact moments in design, visiting Greenbrier Resort, designed by Dorothy Draper. And I'm curious what it was about that had such an impact on you. And I'm curious if that then, how that influenced your design as you became a professional.
Well, I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, and everybody in Charlottesville, Virginia, my mother was sort of a frustrated decorator. She had lovely taste and she loved helping her friends push furniture around. Those days, people didn't kind of hire fancy decorators. Probably they couldn't afford it, but they also liked to do their own houses. So there was a curtain lady who made the curtains and, somebody who did the upholstery. So mommy was always kind of fiddling, not only with our houses, but helping her friends. And but the taste was, there were lots of Oriental rugs and English furniture and sort of subdued colors. And so I was 14 and I got taken to the Greenbrier Hotel with my parents and some friends of theirs who had been investors in the redo of the hotel. And so we walk in and there are emerald green walls with white trim. There are black background carpets, cabbage roses, shocking pink this. I mean, it was unbelievable. The colors, the excitement of it. And I was like, wow. And we got a tour because we got to see the presidential suite. We got to see everything. I was blown away by it. And yes, guess what? I love bright colors. I think you have to tone them down, and I mix my bright colors with more neutral colors, but it certainly showed me a different path to design. And that's why I think travel, going to see things, it's the most valuable thing that any young designer or any older designer. I still travel and I'm old and I can't wait for COVID to be over so I can go look at some more interiors and be inspired by, something that I haven't seen.
What do you miss most? Where's the first place you're going to go?
Well, it was funny. I had just planned to go to Morocco and Tangier when COVID started, and I had to cancel those plans. So I think I'd like to regroup and do that. We like to travel with a couple of our friends. We have a couple couples, and I like to rent houses and kind of do day trips from it. It's easier on us so that we're not hopping. So I try to find a wonderful house to rent and then go do day trips and come back and have a nice supper. And it makes the travel, I think, more interesting. So that's probably the first thing we'll do. And then I want to go back to Sweden and look at some of the Swedish houses. So that'll be on my agenda.
When you travel, do you travel as designer or do you travel as someone who is just wide-eyed and ready to be a visitor?
Well, I will tell you, particularly with my husband, John, I always plan of what I want to see, which is usually a house that I can go see. But of course, I can't wait to find out where the shops are. So I'm always looking I remember being in Lisbon and I went to see the museums, of course, but I did that very quickly. So I wanted to get to the shopping area. And what's fun about that is that if you're in a town and you can find some antique shops or designer shops, they often share with you places you wouldn't know, that wouldn't be on the beaten path. A great restaurant, that the neighborhood restaurant they could go to, or a garden that you might want to go see. So you learn a lot from people. And if you don't know anybody in a city, and you go into a store or an antique shop or something and tell them you're a designer and start talking to them, you often learn about things that you would not necessarily find in a guidebook.
Do you find that, with the proliferation of the internet, that it's harder to find, and it's harder when you're traveling, that it's harder to find things that traditional locations where you might have found things before have been fairly picked clean?
Oh, totally. I mean, I was in, I don't know where we were. I think we were in Sicily, in this little town, and we came upon this potter that was making these wonderful, dinner plates and stuff. And we ordered them. I still have them here. And about a year later, he was on the internet and had his own website, and you could order directly from him. So yes, but on the other hand, I will say, thank heavens for that, because he's in a little town in Sicily that not many people go to, and he wouldn't be able to survive if he didn't get orders from the internet. So it keeps people in business. It makes it harder to find something, but that's okay. You put it together in your own way, and you combine your Indian tablecloth with your pottery you bought in Sicily, with your contemporary glasses that I sell from a local glassmaker in Connecticut and 100 Main, and all of a sudden you have something that's unique because you've put it together.
Well, it also creates more work, doesn't it? Because the moment something new and original winds up on the pages of, Elle Decor or AD as a Bunny Williams design, good luck trying to source that in the future.
But you're always looking. I mean, that's our hunt. That's the fun thing, is trying to be curious and hear about something. But it's the way you put it together that's always going to make it. You can always make it your own by combining, I put my antique blue Canton plates with Christopher Spitzmiller's modern ones, and a young ceramist that made me some blue and white splatterware bowls. So it's all put together. It works, but you can't buy them all in one place. And that's sort of what's fun.
So let's talk about sourcing for a minute. And it's such a big part of the designer's world, sourcing and locating new things. And again, not to dwell on the past 12 months, but when you don't have any shows in the last 12 months to go see what's new out there, how has the firm adapted to that, and how do you source new product?
It's been hard in the last year, and certainly hard for companies that want to introduce new product. I think that you rely, the people that you do business with, if we've communicated with them and said, do you have something new? What's coming out? I think the development in the past year has been slower for many people. The supply chain has been difficult, getting materials. It's been very hard. I'm sure all of you know that. I mean, you want a fabric and they have 10 yards and they can't even tell you when you're going to get the 40 yards you want. So that part's been very complicating. I think that I find in the last years, I've designed some new things of my own, had a local person make them. So I think that, this past year, I wouldn't say there have been a lot of new introductions, but I have a feeling in the next 6 to 8 months, there'll be lots, because people are, building up and getting back to normal. I think it was very hard for companies to even fill the orders that they've been getting of existing product over the last year because of the supply chain, which has been very hard.
In addition to the supply chain, there have been material shortages.
Oh, yeah.
Which is leading to some pretty significant price increases, as you mentioned. What's curious to me is what is your view on the next 12 to 24 months in design? Does it spike and then find its level again, or is it going to spike and stay there because that's the new normal? What are you telling clients?
Well, I feel right now, I mean, the thing that's so interesting is how much work many designers have. I've never seen so much movement in people in my life, people buying that house in Florida because they don't want to pay taxes someplace. Because of their business, they're relocating to another city because they don't have to be where they were. The company's moving. So there's a lot of movement. This is going to last for a couple of years, I think. So it'll be interesting to see, is this momentum, does that keep up? I certainly think the supplies will get more normal as, it depends what happens in the rest of the world. Shipping is so hard. So if that becomes more normal, hopefully some of the shipping prices and things will go down. But I think it's interesting. I think we are in a bubble right now. I think there's a lot of work. I think designers are really busy. I can't tell you 4 years from now, but certainly the work I have is, it's 2 years out or even 3 years out, because if somebody's building a new house, it can take that long. So it'll be interesting to see 4 years from now if there's as much movement. They actually might not like where they move to, so they come back to New York. It's New York I worry about the most.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
But New York survives everything.
It's tough now. I'll go back Sunday and be in New York all next week. You walk up Madison Avenue, and it's 70% boarded up. Lexington Avenue is same way. The restaurants have all built these little, outside dining, because the city still has limited supply. So, living and if the number of people don't have to come back to New York to work, if they can work at home, the population of New York City is going to decrease, and that's going to affect stores. It's going to affect restaurants. It's going to affect the theater. And it's going to take a while to get the tourism back. So New York's got a ways to go. I think it's going to be slow. It's not going to come back tomorrow.
But what's interesting too about the state of design, and you mentioned this, is that people are moving. People are, you look back at the Industrial Revolution where everybody just moved to big cities, and you've got the kind of the opposite effect of what's happening now, at least here in the States, which is really interesting to me, because I think in addition to people moving to different areas because they can do what they've always done, now they can do them remotely and virtually. You also have the fact that over the past 12 months, people realized that their homes were not as functional as they wanted them to be. And I'm curious how you envision this blend of form and function specifically in design moving forward.
Well, again, I think that if people feel that they can in the future work at home, they're going to want spaces big enough to accommodate that. I mean, it's many people know they've been, if you have a studio apartment and you've been in that studio apartment for the last year trying to work on your computer and eat and live, it can get very close. So I think that somebody who's living in a studio apartment in New York and can work online might say, if I move up to where I'm in Connecticut for the same amount of money, I can have a house and a separate room. And maybe I'm going to think differently about where I live. And that's going to sort itself out. It so much depends what field you're in. My niece and her husband moved up to stay in our guest house because he's a computer designer and he's online anyway. And she's a ceramicist. So, and I've loved having them here. Thank heavens. Without them, I wouldn't have gotten through my computer. I had really good computer training. But so I don't know. And they're young and they're not sure they want to go back to New York. I mean, he can get up in the morning and bike for, an hour before he goes online. And, the freedom of living in a beautiful, not urban area is kind of nice. So everybody's going to have to, I think even for me, I've been given the opportunity to live in this house I've owned for 40 years for almost a year. Mm-hmm. I've never spent this much time here, ever. And I like it. So.
As functionally speaking, what issues have you had, if any, as far as, aside from the technical ones and the computer ones, as far as doing the job remotely?
It's the sourcing. I think that I find it very hard. I mean, just before I started talking to you, I was looking for something. I spent 2 hours trying to search some tiles I wanted, and I still couldn't find them. Now, if I were in New York, I probably could have gone to the place, asked them. I can't get a hold of them. The shop isn't open. So, even looking online, whether you're on First Dibs or, in Collect or, any of the furniture sites, you have to spend a lot of hours trying to find. I was on there yesterday for 2 hours and I found one chair and one table. Well, I was bored at the end of that. I mean, thought I was going to jump out of the window. I was like, because, there's so much ugly things that you try to zero into exactly what you're looking at, but they don't always listen to you. So, it's hard. I find that exhausting. And we were talking about furniture. I often will say to a showroom, would you please sit in that chair? I want this chair. It's in your showroom, but I want somebody to sit in it. And then you got to send me a picture because I can't really tell the scale of a chair from the printout. So you can see that this nice man is sitting in the chair and he doesn't look like he fits very well. So the chair is too small. And I often say, I mean, we do it on video. And I said, you've got to tell me how does that chair sit? Because I'll order it, but I just got to know it's the right scale for the bedroom I want to put it in. So there've been a lot more, and you're absolutely right. The salespeople have been phenomenal, so much help. And the ones who are really skilled, know their product, can help you so much.
In just sort of dovetailing into that, can you identify what you still need that maybe you don't have now or
You can hear my dogs bark. Oh, sorry. What I don't have, excuse me, I knew that would happen. Excuse me.
He didn't like my question at all, did he? He didn't like the question.
Well, the dogs didn't. What is interesting is I feel like I still don't have here quite enough of my books and things that I need. What's great is I can go online. So if I need something from a particular company, I can go on their website. But sometimes I like to look through some of the books. It's faster for me than, so I'm building more of a library so I can be more productive when I'm here.
Is there a happy medium between, because many designers don't have the benefit of a dedicated studio at home? Is there a happy medium between what digital resources are being provided now, or is there a better way to provide the digital resources versus the actual physical library within the home studio?
Well, I think there's certain things you need that are physical. I mean, I think you need some fabrics, you need books so you can feel it and what what you have. I think that what's interesting is that people are if they're going to be at home more, they're going to start looking, as I say, where they live. Is there a bedroom that can become the office? I think it's very important to have a place that you can get up and leave and not have your children all over it or your husband or the dogs or whatever. So you can shut the door. And I think that one needs to think of trying to carve out that space for them. And then you can have I have wonderful design friends who have big businesses and they work from their home. They're in different cities. And I'm always envious of that. I'm like, wow. I didn't need it because I was in New York, but now that I've learned to live here, I'd like to have both.
Well, and I'm curious, sort of building on that idea, from the Spanish flu, so many design ideas came out of that. the use of subway tile in the home, the idea of the modern vestibule, which today could be compared to, your Amazon drop zone. So many different ideas came out of that. I'm curious how you see design responding to those, which you mentioned, to those specific needs now.
Well, I think everybody, when I work for a family and everybody needs spaces for their laptop, their computer. What's interesting, a lot of young people work on their laptops on their laps. I happen to like mine on a table. I mean, I can watch a movie in my lap, but I can't type and do what I have. So we are thinking of whose office, her office, his office, are the kids at home, where they're going to work. So a lot of times, in the dining room, instead of just having a big formal dining room, there's a table off to the side. There's another table that can serve as a workstation. So I do think we're all realizing that we're going to be on our computers at home much more than we might have been in the future.
And totally agree. Just sort of a couple of scattershot questions for you, some complete non sequiturs. Sort of wrapping this up that I'm curious about. Specifically, I want to start with the dogs. Dogs have been such a big part of your life, and now it's almost acceptable. It is acceptable, really. You're having a meeting and the dogs bark. It's like, hey, I'm at home. I mean, look, they live here too. But as far as dogs have always been such a big part of your life. And you've had a Norfolk. I've had a Norfolk. Wonderful dogs. It just sort of what is it about dogs? John and his whippets. What is it about the dogs that has been so impactful for you?
Well, I grew up, my father raised beagles, so I grew up with dogs. I always had dogs. And then when I came to New York and actually went to work for Mrs. Parrish, who had these kind of nasty Pekingese, and of course I couldn't take my dog to the office and I couldn't afford to have a babysitter for the dog. So years went by where I didn't have a dog. And the minute I left Parrish Hadley, the first thing I did was to get my first Norfolk Terrier. And John has always had his whippets and he could take them to the shop. When I first went in John's shop, I opened the door and I went, because there was a big pillow and about 4 whippets all sound asleep, beautifully draped on this cushion in the antique store. So the antique shop was always filled with dogs. What I really love about one of my favorite dog stories is one of my very best clients, a person who I've done a number of houses and I still work with them. He didn't like dogs. And it was his only flaw. I can tell you, I loved his wife, I loved his family, but he didn't like dogs. So I used to have to leave Brewster, my Norfolk Terrier, in the car when I stopped with a site visit in Connecticut, make sure the windows were rolled down and there was plenty of water. And one day he came home years later and his wife met him at the door and said, she had his favorite drink. And he looked at her and the children had grown and left home. And he looked at her and he said, I know you're not pregnant. You must have gotten a dog. And she had gone and adopted the mangiest dog from a shelter you've ever seen. And let me tell you, this man is the best dog owner I've ever met. He was taken over and loved this dog, loves other dogs. It's just hysterical. And I always remember when I couldn't allow my dog out of the car. Dogs, you're either a dog person or you're not. I always love terriers because I think they're big little dogs. They think they're 500 pounds and they're about 15. I now have rescues to John's horror because he always had these beautiful purebred dogs. And I have a terrier mix and a little white fluffy thing that is supposed to be a terrier, but I don't know what she is. But we love them. And I got into wanting to rescue dogs because if I wanted a Norfolk Terrier, I'd have to wait 2 years and pay a fortune. And I thought, so I've now had about 5 rescue dogs, which I've loved. And I just can't imagine my life without them.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I think one of the things that I really admire most about you is your definitive nature. And, you've said things before, like with regard to your clients and friendships with your clients. And I think this is important, which is why I'm really bringing it up here. Your goal is not to become friends, with all of your clients. It is a very distinct work relationship, which I think many new designers get trapped in this. They desire for that friendship to come along with the work because they feel it's necessary for the relationship. So they're taking texts at 10 o'clock midnight. They're talking business Saturdays, Sundays. But you're very clear in the ideas that work is work, friends are friends.
What's interesting, though, is I'm very clear about that in the beginning, because I think it comes back to this is a business relationship. When you work with people over and over again, they become dear friends, and you become dear friends to them, not because you're a part of their social set or you going to the house for dinner, but you have an intimacy because you know their life, you know how they get along, you know everything about them. In decorating you cannot hide anything from a decorator in the end if you're working with them over and over again. And so you have a friendship that's almost deeper than the kind of social friendship where you see people at a party or a dinner. You have an intimate relationship with your clients. And if you can do that, they will be your client forever. But I think you always have to start it out of what the boundaries are. And even, when I go and have a dinner with my wonderful clients, it's just the two of them and John and me. And it's not a dinner. I don't want to feel that I have to be at every party they give, or, I'll go to children's weddings or something, but you're not a part of their social life. I have my own social life. I have my own friends. So I think you have to be clear, unless you want to be a part of it, how that works. And I like to set the boundaries in the beginning. And then later, as you really get to know somebody, you have a deeper friendship.
Thank you, Bunny, for your skill, wit, willingness to share, your incredible talent, and your love for dogs. It was my honor speaking with you, and congratulations. Thank you to my partners and sponsors, Thermosol and Design Hardware, for making the show possible. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show and the feedback I receive. Thank you for your guest and topic suggestions. If not already, please subscribe to the podcast so you receive every episode automatically in your feed the moment they're published. If you are so inclined, please consider following us on Instagram, Convo By Design with an X, and we can further the conversation. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, be well and take today first.